A young black woman was fired after helping Sylvester Stallone on a rainy night. But the next day, he received news that changed both of their lives forever. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspirational stories. Help us reach our first 1,000 subscribers and keep these powerful stories alive. It all started one day in January. The rain hadn't stopped since noon. Just a low, steady drizzle that soaked everything and seemed to press down on the city like a heavy sigh. Janelle Robinson, a 30-year-old black woman from the West End of Atlanta, stood behind the kitchen sink of Bella Vino, an old Italian restaurant with faded red booths and a leaky roof. She had worked there for nearly 2 years, officially as a line cook, unofficially as a dishwasher, janitor, and everything else no one else wanted to do. She never complained. As a black woman working in the service industry in the South, she knew how little room she had for error. She came in early, left late, and did her job quietly. But it never seemed to be enough. Not to her manager, not to the other staff, and certainly not to the men in suits who owned the place and only showed up when someone from corporate came to visit. On that night, the restaurant was nearly empty, with the storm keeping most of the regulars at home. Janelle was alone in the back, scrubbing a tray of burnt lasagna that someone had forgotten in the oven. She was exhausted. Her hands were raw, her lower back ached, and the shoes she'd bought at the Goodwill last spring were soaked through. She had just thrown a wet rag over her shoulder and started wiping down the counters when she heard it. A soft knock on the back door. For a moment, she froze. That door wasn't for customers. It was used by the kitchen crew and the delivery guys, and even then, only during daylight. She walked over cautiously and cracked it open. Standing there, soaked from head to toe, was an older white man in a black hoodie. Rain poured from his sleeves, and his sneakers squished against the concrete. She might have closed the door on him right then, if not for the look in his eyes. He wasn't drunk, and he wasn't angry. He looked lost. "Sorry," he said, voice low and hoarse. "My phone died. Driver dropped me at the wrong address. I just needed to get out of the rain for a second." Janelle didn't recognize him immediately. The hoodie and the shadows under his eyes disguised who he was. She knew she shouldn't let him in. Not with her record. Not as a black woman alone, with a white man in a place with no cameras. But she opened the door anyway and stepped aside. "You're soaked," she muttered, grabbing an old dish towel from the hook. "Sit there." She pointed to a metal prep bench against the wall. He nodded and sat down, not saying much. She poured him a cup of decaf, no cream, no sugar, and handed it to him. He cupped it with both hands like it was the first warmth he'd had in hours. They didn't talk much. He didn't volunteer any details, and she didn't pry. He thanked her quietly, finished the coffee, and stood to leave. That's when the hood slipped a little, and the kitchen light hit his face. She blinked. He looked familiar. Too familiar. But by the time she realized who he was, Sylvester Stallone, he was already at the door. "You didn't ask me for anything," he said, pausing before stepping back out into the rain. "That's rare." Janelle shrugged. "Didn't think you owed me anything." He nodded once, pulled up his hood, and walked into the darkness. She never expected to see him again. The next morning, the rain was still falling. Janelle arrived at the restaurant early, as she always did, just before 7. She set her bag down by the lockers and put on her apron. 10 minutes later, Mr. Carlton, the general manager, stormed into the kitchen with a sour look on his face. Carlton was in his late 50s, with thinning gray hair and a voice that always seemed to be scolding someone. He looked at Janelle like she was a smudge on the menu. "You let someone in the building last night?" he barked. Janelle nodded slowly, not understanding the tone. "Yeah, guy was soaked, looked like he needed help. I gave him a towel and coffee." Carlton's eyes narrowed. "Did you know him?" She shook her head. "Not at first." "And you let a stranger into my kitchen?" he growled. "Are you trying to get us sued?" She tried to explain, tried to tell him about the man's condition, the rain, the fact that he just needed a moment of shelter. But Carlton wasn't listening. "You people always have some excuse," he snapped. The room went silent. The sous chef froze. The new hostess turned red. Janelle's face hardened. "What do you mean by you people?" she asked, steady but cold. Carlton didn't flinch. "You know damn well what I mean. You act like the rules don't apply to you. You think because you're poor, you get to do whatever you want and call it kindness. But this is a business, and you just risked everything because some old white guy looked sad." Janelle stood her ground. She didn't yell, didn't cry. She'd grown up with this kind of racism camouflaged in rules and policies her whole life. But hearing it said out loud, in front of others, still struck a nerve. "He was a human being," she said. "I treated him like one. That's more than you've ever done for me." Carlton snorted. "Well, now you've got all the time in the world to be a damn good Samaritan." He threw a folded paper at her chest. Termination notice, effective immediately. Janelle packed her things in silence. No one spoke. No one helped. As she stepped out the back door with a cardboard box in her arms and her apron stuffed on top, the rain hit her face like cold needles. She stood under the awning for a moment, watching cars pass on Boulevard Avenue, the water flooding the gutters in angry little rivers. She walked home, soaked to the skin, every step a reminder that she had lost her job for being decent. Not because she stole, not because she was late, but because she saw someone cold and chose to care. Her mother didn't ask many questions that evening. She was used to watching Janelle come home tired, quiet, and worn thin. She simply made a cup of tea, handed her daughter a blanket, and sat beside her while the rain tapped softly on the window. At 2 p.m. the next day, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Deja, her childhood best friend. "Turn on the news. Channel 2. Now." Janelle grabbed the remote with trembling hands and turned the TV on. There, sitting behind a row of microphones, at what looked like a press conference, was Stallone. He looked older, yes, but also shaken. He cleared his throat. "I don't normally do this. I don't usually talk about the personal stuff. But 2 nights ago, I lost someone important to me. My nephew. He was young. Good kid. I was in Atlanta for an event when I got the call. My driver took a wrong turn, and I ended up at this little Italian restaurant. I was drenched, angry, couldn't think straight." He paused. "And then someone let me in. A young black woman. She didn't ask my name, didn't take a picture. She just handed me a cup of coffee like I was some tired old man who needed to get dry. And she was right." The camera zoomed in on his face. "I don't know her name, but I'd like to. If she's watching this, thank you for being the kind of person who still believes people matter. And if anyone can help me find her, please. I want to do something right for once." Janelle stared at the screen. Her mouth parted. Her hands trembled. Deja's text buzzed again. "That's you, girl. You're the story." And just like that, the girl who got fired for being kind became the woman the whole country was trying to find. The news spread faster than she could process. That afternoon, her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Calls, texts, tags on social media. Her cousin sent her a screenshot from Twitter. # Stallone Angel was trending. Deja called twice just to scream in her ear, "Girl, that man is looking for you." But Janelle didn't know how to feel. It wasn't fame she wanted. She didn't need to be found. She just wanted to forget the humiliation, the sting of Carlton's voice, the way her co-workers stared at the floor while he fired her. She wanted to breathe without fear of next month's rent or the overdue light bill. So she didn't call the number scrolling across the screen. She didn't reach out to the news station. Instead, she shut off her phone, pulled her coat over her head, and walked to her mother's clinic to pick up a prescription. The next morning, she woke to the sound of knocking. It wasn't frantic, but firm, controlled, like someone who knew how to make people listen. She opened the door to find a tall, well-dressed white man in his late 40s standing on her front steps, holding a clipboard. "Ms. Robinson?" he asked, voice polite but guarded. "I work with Mr. Stallone's outreach team. May we speak to you for a moment?" She blinked, unsure if she was dreaming. Behind him, parked quietly along the curb, was a black SUV with tinted windows. Before she could respond, the back passenger door opened, and there he was. Dressed in a navy pea coat and black gloves, Sylvester Stallone stepped out onto her walkway. In person, he seemed taller, not because of his height, but because of the weight he carried, the quiet kind of grief that didn't show up in words, but lived in the lines around the eyes. He looked at her with a gentleness that knocked the breath from her chest. "Janelle," he said softly, "can we talk?" She didn't answer, only nodded and stepped aside to let him into the small apartment. Her mother wasn't home, at a church prayer group, and the living room smelled of lemon oil and warm dust. She gestured toward the couch. He sat. "I've been looking for you," he said, eyes never leaving hers. "And I know this probably feels strange, uncomfortable even, but I couldn't leave it the way it was." Janelle crossed her arms. "You're a movie star. You don't owe me anything." "Maybe not," he said, "but that night, what you did, that was the first time in months someone saw me. Not the actor, not the guy from the posters, just me. That mattered." She exhaled, unsure what to say. His voice, usually so tough and gravelly in movies, had a softness that caught her off guard. "I got fired for that, you know." He looked down, jaw tightening. "I heard. That's why I'm here." They sat in silence for a moment. Rain had started again, tapping softly on the window pane. Then he stood. "I went to that restaurant this morning. Your old job." Janelle's head snapped up. "What?" "I walked in, asked for the manager, that Carlton guy." She stiffened. "What did he say?" Stallone's eyes narrowed, his mouth pressing into a hard line. "He acted like he didn't know anything, smiled real big, called me sir 5 times in one sentence, said there had been a misunderstanding." She scoffed. "Of course he did. I asked him point blank why he fired you. He said, and I quote, 'We can't have people like her making decisions above their station.'" Janelle felt her stomach drop. The phrase hung in the air like smoke. People like her. He said it in front of my assistant, in front of the kitchen staff, like he wasn't even ashamed. Stallone's voice turned cold. "And when I told him I was the one you helped, that I was grateful, you know what he said?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. She could already feel the heat building in her chest. He said you probably only helped because you were looking for a handout, because that's what those people do. Janelle's breath caught. Her hands clenched into fists. She knew this language, knew this venom. It wasn't always loud. Sometimes it came in smiles. Sometimes it came in phrases like professionalism and policy. But today, it came in raw, open hatred. And it came from the man who once shook her hand on Christmas Eve and told her she was like family. Stallone's voice dropped. So I did something I haven't done in a long time. She blinked. What? He didn't speak, just raised his right fist slowly, wrist curled, knuckles tight. A familiar stance, a Rocky Balboa stance. And for a second, Janelle thought he was joking. But then he said, calm as ever, I hit him. You what? Right in the jaw. Not hard enough to break anything, but hard enough to make a point. Janelle's mouth fell open. You punched Carlton. I did, he said. Old habits die hard. She stared at him, a mix of horror and awe. I don't even know what to say. He shrugged. Some things deserve a punch. That man made you feel small, like you didn't matter. But you do. And I wasn't about to walk out of there and let him keep believing he could treat people like that. Janelle sat down, hands covering her face. It was too much, too strange, too unbelievable. Stallone, the man whose face she grew up watching on TV beside her father, punching her racist manager in the jaw. But when she looked up again, his expression had softened. I didn't just come here to punch somebody, he said. I came to offer you something. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded envelope. Inside was a letterhead from the Stallone Family Foundation, a non-profit based in Los Angeles that funded scholarships, job training, and support for underrepresented women in the workforce. I'd like to bring you on, he said. You'd be working in community outreach, full benefits, relocation assistance if you need it, or if you want to stay in Atlanta, we'll find a way. But it's yours, if you want it. Janelle's hands trembled as she held the letter. Why me? She asked. Because you did the right thing when no one was watching, he replied. Because people like you don't get noticed enough. And because I need more folks like you around me. She looked down at the paper, heart pounding. The salary alone was more than she'd ever made in her life. Health insurance would cover her mother's medication. There was even an educational stipend if she ever wanted to go back to school. But something stopped her. I didn't help you for this, she whispered. I wasn't trying to get a job. I know, he said. That's why you deserve it. She closed her eyes. The silence stretched. When she opened them, she saw not a movie star, but a man, grieving, grateful, and offering her a chance. Outside, the rain had stopped. For the first time in days, a shaft of sunlight pushed through the clouds and fell across her worn hardwood floor. And in that light, for the first time in her life, Janelle Robinson didn't feel small. Janelle didn't answer right away. After Stallone left that day, she sat on the couch for over an hour, with the letter still clutched in her hands, staring at the faded spot on the rug where the sunlight had landed. Her mind was a storm, grateful, confused, overwhelmed, and suspicious all at once. Growing up black in America, she'd learned not to trust miracles that came wrapped in too perfect paper. People didn't just walk into your life and offer you salvation. There was always a catch. And yet, nothing about Stallone felt forced. His hands shook slightly when he talked about his nephew. His eyes were tired but kind. His anger at Carlton had been genuine, not performative. And the way he spoke to her, as if she were the only person in the room. No one had looked at her like that in years. By the following morning, she had made her decision. She pulled out her phone, opened the message from his foundation contact, and typed one word: yes. Within minutes, they replied. Arrangements would be made. She would stay in Atlanta, but work remotely for the time being, handling community outreach for women re-entering the workforce. They would send her equipment. The salary would begin immediately. The benefits would begin even sooner. And if she needed anything at all, she was to reach out. But what stayed with her wasn't the money. It was the look on Stallone's face when he mentioned his nephew. The grief sat there, heavy like stone beneath his skin. She couldn't shake it. So that same evening, she asked the foundation representative if she might be able to visit the hospital where his family had been. The woman on the phone was quiet for a moment, then said, "I'll see what I can do." The next morning, Janelle received a message with a time, an address, and a name. St. Joseph's Hospital, Peachtree Street, room 612. She arrived just after 3 p.m., wearing a simple blue blouse and the same thrifted jeans she always wore when she wanted to feel grounded. The hospital halls smelled of antiseptic and cafeteria food, and her hands trembled as she walked past the nurse's station. A young black nurse with a soft smile met her in the hallway. "You must be Janelle," the nurse said, as if she already knew her. "He's inside." Janelle stepped into the room. It was quiet except for the low beeping of monitors and the gentle rustle of hospital sheets. Stallone sat beside the bed, holding the hand of a young woman, mid-20s, maybe younger, thin, pale, and beautiful. In that fragile way people become when illness chips away at them. Her skin was olive-toned like his, her dark hair tucked behind her ears, her eyes closed in sleep. He looked up when Janelle entered, and something in his posture softened. "You came," he said quietly. She nodded, unsure what to do with her hands. "I didn't mean to intrude. I just wanted to see." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Please, sit." They sat in silence for a few minutes. The machines beeped on. Outside the window, the late afternoon light turned everything gold. Stallone leaned back, his shoulders heavy. "Her name's Maria, my sister's only daughter. She's been fighting a rare blood disorder since she was 17. Doctors said she wouldn't make it past 20. She's 24 now. Been in and out of hospitals more times than I can count." Janelle listened, her chest tight. "She's beautiful." "She used to paint," he said, almost to himself. "Wild things, landscapes, big skies." Said she liked imagining places she could run to when this was all too much. Janelle glanced around the room. On the windowsill sat a tiny watercolor of a mountain range. It was delicate, dreamy, nothing like the world outside. "She asked about you, Stallone said. "When she saw me smile again for the first time in weeks, she asked who made it happen." "I didn't do anything," Janelle replied, her voice low. "You did more than you know," he said. "When the world makes you feel invisible for long enough, kindness starts to feel like a myth. But you brought it back. Not just for me, for her too." Maria stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She blinked slowly, adjusting to the light. When she saw Janelle, a small smile touched her lips. "You're the angel," she whispered. Janelle blinked back tears. "I'm just a cook." "No," Maria said. "You're the reason he came back to me with hope in his eyes." For the next hour, they sat together, talking softly. Maria told her stories about her childhood, how Stallone used to chase her through the house pretending to be Rambo, how he taught her how to throw a punch, how he sat beside her every single night she was too sick to sleep. Janelle shared stories, too, about growing up in South Atlanta, about walking to school past broken sidewalks and liquor stores, about learning to cook from her grandmother because the stove was the only place that ever felt safe. When it was time to leave, Janelle stood by the door, unsure of what to say. Stallone followed her into the hallway. "I meant what I said," he told her, "about this not being charity. You earned this. You earned all of it." She looked up at him, heart full, eyes wet. "It just feels too much." He smiled gently. "Sometimes the world takes too much from people like you. This is just a little of it coming back." They stood for a moment, the hum of the hallway around them. Then Stallone reached into his pocket and pulled out a small item, a keychain shaped like boxing gloves. "This was mine during my first Rocky audition," he said. "Reminded me that I wasn't just acting. I was fighting for my place, for my name." He pressed it into her palm. "Keep it for days when you forget who you are." Janelle didn't trust herself to speak. She just nodded and held the keychain tight. Back home, she placed it beside her grandmother's photo on the shelf. Then she sat down and opened her laptop. Her first assignment with the foundation was simple: create a program for young women of color who had been wrongfully fired or pushed out of workplaces for standing up, for caring, for daring to speak. She called it the Backdoor Project, a quiet nod to where her story began. Within a month, the project received hundreds of inquiries. Women wrote in from Alabama, Mississippi, South Carolina, each one carrying her own version of what Janelle had lived. And now, she had the power to help them. Not just with words, but with jobs, resources, legal aid, and hope. She never forgot that night in the rain. Never forgot Carlton's face or Stallone's fists. But what stayed with her more than anything else was Maria's voice, soft and sure, calling her an angel. And every time she passed the mirror, Janelle no longer saw just a tired waitress or a girl from the West End. She saw the woman who made a fighter remember how to hope,